Hello, and welcome to the Spicy Pod Sleep Stories. I am Michael, and tonight, she meets a man in a quiet cafe where danger lingers in every shadow. He's a man she shouldn't trust, a man she shouldn't want. But when he appears, wounded and commanding, she can't turn away. One night, one stolen kiss, and everything changes. A night of closeness, whispered promises, and a heat that neither of them can ignore. Witness a spark that could burn them both. The cafe was minutes from closing, wrapped in that soft, late-night stillness she'd always loved. Outside, the rain tapped gently against the windows, blurring the street lights into golden smears. Inside, the air smelled faintly of warm vanilla and cinnamon, though most of the pastries were already packed away. She was wiping down the final table, humming under her breath, when the bell over the door chimed. She didn't look up at first, probably another passerby wanting shelter from the rain. But then a strange, heavy silence followed the sound. No steps, no small talk greeting, no dripping umbrella being shaken off. Just stillness. Her hand froze mid-wipe, a prickle running up her spine. She lifted her head slowly. A man stood just inside the door, tall, broad-shouldered, soaked from the rain, dark hair plastered to his forehead, and one hand pressed tightly to his side, fingers stained with something darker than water. Blood. Her breath caught. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't stumbling. He stood with an eerie kind of control, like the pain barely touched him. His eyes were the sharpest thing about him, a cold, midnight blue that swept over the cafe, then landed on her, held, pinned. She felt it all the way to her knees. He didn't speak. He just took one slow step forward, then another, before quietly sliding the bolt on the door behind him. Her heart kicked. Sir, that's for employees only," she managed. He didn't smile, but something flickered in his eyes. Something dark. Something almost amused. "I need a place to sit," he said, voice low and rough, as if dragged over gravel. "Somewhere away from the windows." She swallowed. Her mind screamed not to move. Her feet moved anyway. "There's a back room," she whispered. He nodded once. Not a thank you, not an apology, just an expectation, as though he'd known she would say yes. When she turned to lead him, she heard him exhale, sharp, controlled, hurt, but he still followed her with that slow, steady gait, like a man trained to walk through pain. The storage room was small, dim, crowded with shelves of coffee beans and boxes of napkins. Cozy, she'd always thought. Safe. It didn't feel safe now. She flicked on the light. He stepped inside, leaning a shoulder against the wall, his breath uneven for the first time. Up close, she saw the tear in his shirt, the fresh bruise blooming across his ribs, rain sliding down his throat. "What happened to you?" she asked, voice softer than she meant. His gaze snapped to hers. "If I tell you," he murmured, "you're involved." A shiver ran through her. She didn't know if it was fear or something else. "I can get the first aid kit," she said instead. That earned her a long, unreadable stare. Then a quiet, "Do it." She opened the cabinet with trembling fingers. When she turned back, he had lowered himself to sit on a wooden crate. His jaw was clenched tight, his breathing shallow, still watching her, always watching. She knelt beside him, her knees brushing the cold tile, the small white kit in her hands. He didn't move when she lifted his shirt. He just studied her, as if memorizing every shift of her expression. The wound was a deep gash along his ribs, not fresh but not old, painful but not fatal. "You should be in a hospital," she whispered, touching the skin around the cut. "Warm, too warm." "No." His voice was sharp, final, then softer. "Just this." Her fingers hovered. "I'm not a nurse." "I know," he said, "but you're helping anyway." He said it quietly, like a fact he'd expected, and somehow liked. Her pulse thrummed painfully. She dabbed the antiseptic on a cotton pad, and as she leaned closer, the scent of rain, leather, and something darker wrapped around her. His breath stirred her hair. His thigh brushed her knee. Every inch between them felt electrified. He winced once, barely, and she started to pull back. His hand shot out, gripping her wrist gently but firmly. "Don't stop." Her breath hitched. "I thought I hurt you." "You didn't." His thumb brushed her skin, slow and warm. "If you're going to help, then help. Don't flinch." The dominance in his tone was unmistakable, not cruel, not demanding, just absolute. She nodded, though her heartbeat was a mess. He let go, but the ghost of his touch stayed on her skin as she returned to the wound. She cleaned it carefully this time, aware of every tiny shift in his breathing. When she was done, she taped the bandage in place, smoothing it lightly with her fingertips. His muscles tensed under her touch, subtle, involuntary, unmistakable. She pulled her hand away quickly. "I'm finished," she whispered. He looked at her for a long, heavy moment. Then his voice dropped to a low, dangerous murmur. "You shouldn't have helped me." Her chest tightened. "Why?" He leaned in just a fraction, enough that she felt warmth radiating off him, felt the weight of his gaze like a hand on her skin. "Because now," he said softly, "you don't get to pretend you don't know me." For a moment, neither of them moved. His words hung in the dim room like smoke, soft, dangerous, impossible to ignore. She felt them settle into her bones, felt her breath catch somewhere between fear and something warmer she couldn't admit to. He didn't break eye contact, not once. Finally, he shifted, rolling his shoulders back despite the pain. The movement made his shirt slide open a little farther, revealing the sharp cut of his abdomen, the bruising along his ribs, the slow rise and fall of breath. He kept tightly controlled. "You did good work," he said, voice low. "Better than I deserved." She blinked at him. Anyone would have helped. A faint, humorless smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. No, they wouldn't. She didn't know what to say to that, so she looked down, fiddling with the leftover bandages, trying to gather the storage she'd lost somewhere between his touch and his stare. "You should rest," she murmured. "You're hurt, and I need to close up." He didn't move to stand. He didn't even try. Instead, he tipped his head slightly, studying her in a way that made her pulse stumble. "Why are you shaking?" Her breath caught. "I'm not." One eyebrow lifted, an expression both skeptical and strangely amused. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her forearm, the lightest contact, but warm enough that it sent a spark straight through her. "You are," he said softly, "but not because you're scared." Her cheeks warmed. "You don't know that." His grip slid a little lower, his thumb grazing the inside of her wrist. Barely anything, yet enough to make her throat tighten. "I know fear," he said, "more than most. And that's not what this is." She swallowed hard. "Then what do you think it is?" His eyes dragged down her face slowly, deliberately, her lips, her flushed cheeks, her trembling breath. When his gaze returned to hers, something hungry flickered there. "Heat," he murmured. Her heart stopped, started again too fast. She stepped back on instinct, needing space, air, something. But he caught her hand, not rough, not pulling, just enough pressure to make her stop. "Don't run." The words were soft, not a command, a request, wrapped like one. "I'm not running," she whispered. "Good." Still holding her hand, he brought her closer again. Not enough to touch, just enough that she felt the warmth of his body, felt his breath graze her cheek. "Let me see it," he said quietly. "See what?" she breathed. "The bandage you're pretending to check," he replied, eyes flicking to the little box she was still clutching. "You're stalling." She flushed. He was right. She wasn't sure if she was stalling from fear or from wanting something she shouldn't want. He let go of her hand, giving her the chance to touch the dressing if she wanted to. She lifted her fingers tentatively, brushing the edge of the white tape. He inhaled sharply at the contact, small but noticeable. "Did that hurt?" she asked quickly, worried. "No." His voice dropped lower. "But you touching me does." Her breath hitched. He leaned in, his forehead almost brushing her temple, his voice barely a whisper against her skin. "Careful with your hands," he murmured. "You don't know what you're starting." She froze, heat curling through her stomach. He drew back just enough to meet her eyes again. His gaze was steady, controlled, dominant, without raising his voice. "You want to ask who did this to me?" he said. "Who I am, what I've done." "I do," she admitted softly, "and I'm not telling you. Not cruel, just absolute." "Why?" she whispered. "Because the less you know, the safer you are." His tone was final until he added, voice softening, "But if you really want answers, you'll get them in time." The way he said it made her pulse skip. Before she could speak, footsteps sounded from the street outside, heavy, stopping right at the cafe door. A shadow passed the glass. She stiffened. His entire body went still. In one fluid motion, he stood, ignoring the pain, and reached for her waist, pulling her close, guiding her behind him, shielding her with his body as if it were instinct. His voice dropped to a whisper, dangerous and quiet. "Stay behind me, don't make a sound." The footsteps stopped just beyond the locked glass door. She felt his body go rigid in front of her, every muscle coiled, silent, alert. The air thickened. The little storage room suddenly too small, too warm, too full of breath she wasn't sure she should even take. He didn't turn his head, didn't look back at her. He just murmured, low enough that only she could hear, "Stay still, stay close." His hand remained on her hip, steady, protective, firm enough to keep her behind him. She shouldn't have liked the feeling of his hand there, not with danger inches away, not with her heart slamming against her ribs, but she did. God help her, she did. A shadow passed across the frosted window of the cafe. Whoever was outside paused, as if listening. Her breath caught. His grip tightened. It was barely a touch. His fingers curling slightly into her waist. But it sent a startled shiver up her spine. His head dipped the smallest bit, his hair brushing her forehead as he whispered, "Breathe." She nodded, or maybe she just trembled. He felt it either way. The figure outside shifted again, testing the door. The metal rattled softly, not violently, worse, quietly, patiently, as though the person had time and intention. She swallowed, her hands lifting instinctively to the back of his shirt, holding on, not pulling, just something to anchor herself. He went utterly still, except for the slow, deliberate way he lowered his hand from her waist to her wrist, guiding her hold, a reassurance, a claim, a wordless stay with me. After a long, suffocating moment, the footsteps moved on, faint, fading, gone. She exhaled shakily. He did not. Not until he counted a few more seconds of silence, of safety, before finally turning, slowly, controlled, tall and looming in the low light, rainwater dripping from his jaw. His eyes found hers, still dark, still dangerous, but warmer now, focused. "You shouldn't have been part of that," he murmured. "I didn't choose it," she whispered. "You chose me," he countered, quiet but firm. "The moment you didn't send me away." Her cheeks warmed. "I didn't know what else to do." He stepped closer. Not enough to touch, enough to feel. "You did more than you realize," he said. His gaze drifted down to where her hands still rested against his shirt. "You stayed. I just didn't want you to collapse." His breath left him in something like a low laugh, soft, almost disbelieving. "You're brave," he said. She shook her head. "I'm really not." "You are," he insisted gently, eyes softening in a way that made her stomach twist. "Most people would have run, locked the door, called someone." "Should I have?" she asked quietly. He stepped another half-inch closer. The air between them tightened. "No," he said. "I didn't want you to." That was when the storm outside cracked, a loud, rolling boom that made her jump. Without thinking, she grabbed his arm. Without hesitation, his hand rose to cradle the side of her waist again. Warm, solid, too steady for someone who claimed to be dangerous. Her voice came small. "Are they gone?" "For now." "For now," she repeated, the words trembling. He lifted his hand to tuck a strand of her hair behind her ear, his touch slow and deliberate, his fingers brushing her cheek a moment longer than it needed to. "You're not in danger because of me," he said, gaze locked on hers. "But if danger ever comes close to you," his thumb traced her jaw, "it won't touch you first." Something about the way he said it, quiet, certain, almost possessive, made warmth bloom through her chest. "What were they looking for?" she whispered. He leaned in, his breath brushing her cheek again. That maddening nearness she could feel more than she could see. "Not you," he said. "And that's the important part." She searched his face, her voice small and unsteady. "But it has something to do with you." "Yes." "And you won't tell me?" "No, but you're staying here." A brief pause, a softening of his gaze. "I am." "Why? You don't even know me." His eyes traveled slowly downward, then back up. So slow, she felt every inch of attention like a warm drag along her skin. "I know enough," he murmured. Another rumble of thunder shook the windows. She startled again, but this time he reached for her before she reached for him. His hand at her hip, his thumb brushing under her ribs, reassuring, protective. Close, too close. "You're trembling again," he whispered. She laughed weakly. "I can't imagine why." His voice dipped, velvet and low. I can. Her heartbeat picked up. He noticed. Of course he noticed. For a long moment they just stood there, the storm outside raging, the air between them thick and warm and humming with something neither dared name yet. Then he said, voice dark but steady, lock the front door properly and then come back. Why? She breathed. His eyes lowered to her lips before returning to her gaze, slow, certain, heated. Because we're not done. The storm had passed, or at least it had quieted outside. The rain left the streets gleaming under the soft glow of the cafe lights. But inside, the storm between them was only growing stronger. She returned to the storage room after securing the front door, the faint sound of water dripping from the roof echoing around them. He was leaning against the counter, one hand tracing the edge absent-mindedly, the other still loosely draped at his side. His dark eyes followed her the instant she stepped in, and she felt the familiar tug in her chest. That warned her she was walking right into something she couldn't control. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, trying to keep her voice calm. His lips curved into a shadow of a smile, a dangerous knowing smile. That made her stomach flutter. I could say the same about you. Her pulse quickened. I was locking the door. Then you're exactly where you're supposed to be, he said, stepping forward. His presence filled the small room, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, close enough that the air between them seemed to hum. She tried to step back, but the wall pressed against her. He was suddenly there, not harshly, not aggressively, but close enough that she felt cornered in the best and worst possible ways. You're dangerous, she breathed. Dangerous. His low chuckle brushed against her ear. No, that's me being careful. You're tempting me. Her cheeks warmed. She looked down, trying to focus on something, anything that wasn't the nearness of him. But he tilted her chin up with the gentlest of touches, his thumb brushing over her jaw, his eyes locking onto hers with that intense, unyielding gaze. I shouldn't be here, he said softly, almost a growl. I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't want you. Then, why? Her voice faltered. He leaned closer and she felt the warmth of him brush her lips. He paused, testing, watching, waiting for permission in the tiniest way, though she knew in her chest that permission wasn't really necessary. Her breath hitched. He closed the distance. His lips met hers, first soft, careful, a whisper of a kiss, but it was enough to make her knees weak. She tasted the faint tang of rainwater and something darker, something magnetic she couldn't name. She kissed him back, hesitantly at first, then with the quiet urgency she didn't know she was holding back. His hands moved to the small of her back, guiding her closer, holding her steady even as her pulse raced and her thoughts scattered. He pulled back just slightly, resting his forehead against hers, breathing hard. His eyes searched hers, and for a moment, the air between them was thick with everything unspoken: danger, desire, trust, and hesitation, all tangled together. "You have no idea what you've done," he murmured, his voice rough with something she couldn't quite name. "I don't regret it," she whispered back, though her heart was hammering in her chest. "Good," he said, "because I don't either." Another long pause, and then he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper in meaning. A kiss that claimed, that tested, that asked questions she didn't have answers for. His hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing over her lips in a silent promise, and she shivered, caught between fear and the strange, thrilling warmth he brought. When he finally stepped back, just slightly, his forehead still leaned against hers, he whispered, almost to himself, "I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't want you. But I do, and I can't stop." She closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. Her fingers brushed against his chest, feeling the steady strength beneath the fabric, feeling the unspoken promise of protection, dominance, and something more dangerous than either of them should admit. For a long moment, they simply stood there, caught between the world outside, the small room around them, and the undeniable pull between them. An unspoken agreement that whatever came next, nothing would be ordinary. And she knew, deep in her chest, that this kiss was only the beginning. The cafe had emptied long ago. The rain had stopped entirely, leaving the streets outside glistening under the moonlight. Inside, the warm smell of coffee and pastries lingered, mingling with the subtle scent of him. Leather, rain, something sharp and magnetic she couldn't name. She had tidied up as best she could, but the night no longer felt like hers. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, even the soft drip of water from the roof, all seemed to echo in the space between them. He was still in the storage room, leaning against the counter, eyes tracking her every movement. "You don't have to stay," she said softly, though part of her feared the thought of him leaving. "I do," he said simply, stepping closer. His presence filled the room, pressing warmth against her in a way that was impossible to ignore. Until morning. She swallowed, nodding, unsure whether to be relieved or nervous. There was something in the way he said it, controlled, firm, but quietly protective, that made her chest tighten. The storm outside might have been gone, but the storm in her heart was only growing. She gestured toward the small sofa in the corner of the cafe office. "You can sit there. I'll get you a blanket." He shook his head almost imperceptibly and instead moved to stand beside her. "Stay with me," he said. Not a request, not an order, a statement, one she found herself obeying without thinking. She perched on the edge of the sofa, and he settled next to her, close but not pressing, yet every inch of the space between them was charged. The warmth radiating from him seeped into her, filling the quiet room with a tension that made her pulse race. "I should go home," she whispered, though part of her didn't want to. "No," he said quietly, "you shouldn't." She hesitated. "But you're hurt. You've been hurt. You need—" "I need nothing but to make sure you're safe," he interrupted, his voice low and controlled. There was a firmness there that made her heart flutter, a dominance she hadn't expected but couldn't ignore. "And you are, as long as I'm here." For a long moment they sat in silence. Her hand rested lightly on her lap, but she could feel the pull of his presence, the subtle warmth of his arm brushing against her side whenever he moved. His eyes, dark and intense, never left her face. At some point, her hand found its way to the edge of the blanket he'd pulled around them. He noticed. Of course he noticed. He leaned just a fraction closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. "You're trembling again?" he murmured. "I'm not," she said, though her voice betrayed her. "You are," he said softly, thumb tracing a careful line along her cheek. "And I like that. Shows me you're alive, awake, feeling." Her breath caught. She looked down, embarrassed, but he didn't let her look away. His gaze was steady, intense, almost claiming. "I don't usually stay," he admitted quietly, "and I shouldn't be here. But tonight," his voice dropped, "tonight, you're my reason too." Her pulse quickened, and without realizing it, she leaned slightly against him. He noticed immediately. His hand rested lightly at her waist, protective, possessive, not forcing, but guiding. Hours seemed to stretch between them, filled with quiet conversation, whispered stories, and long silences that spoke more than words ever could. He told her fragments of who he was, not the whole truth, but enough for her to feel connected, to understand that beneath the danger there was something reliable, something protective, something undeniably magnetic. She tended to him again when he winced, smoothing the bandage over his ribs, her fingers brushing against his skin. He let her, softer this time, his body relaxing just enough to let the vulnerability show. As she leaned back, exhausted, she felt him shift beside her, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders without a word. The warmth pressed against her, steady and safe. She closed her eyes, letting the calm settle over her, though her pulse still fluttered with awareness of him, of his closeness, of the unspoken promise lingering in the air. He whispered, almost to himself, as if confirming it to the quiet room, "I shouldn't want you, but tonight I do." And with that, She felt herself drifting into sleep, curling instinctively against him, feeling the weight of him behind her, the heat of him surrounding her, and the strange, thrilling certainty that nothing about this night, nothing about him, would ever be ordinary. The first pale light of dawn filtered through the cafe windows, casting soft gold over the quiet room. The night storm had left the streets slick and sparkling, but inside, the world felt hushed, suspended in a bubble of warmth and lingering tension. She stirred slowly, aware of a weight at her back, a steady warmth that pressed against her shoulder and waist. Her fingers brushed the fabric of his jacket, still draped over her, and a soft smile lifted her lips. He was still there, lying on the small sofa beside her, half awake, watching her with those impossibly dark, calculating eyes softened only by something unspoken. Protection, fascination, and something far more intimate. She moved carefully, afraid to wake him, but he stirred instantly at the faint sound, lifting his head slightly, dark eyes finding hers. "You're awake," he murmured, voice low, rough around the edges, still carrying the heat of last night. "I was asleep," she whispered, cheeks warming. "You stayed?" He tilted his head, a faint smirk curving his lips. "I said I would, and I always keep my word." Her heart skipped. There was no boast in his tone, no arrogance, just an unshakable certainty, a dominance that was quiet but absolute. She wanted to argue, to remind him he had no reason to care, but the warmth of him, the intensity of his gaze made words impossible. He finally shifted, stretching slightly, and she could see the faint traces of pain along his ribs and shoulder. She reached instinctively to adjust the bandage, but he stopped her with a hand over hers. "Let it be," he said softly. "I've survived worse." His thumb brushed lightly over her skin, and the gesture sent an electric shiver through her. The moment stretched, a quiet, charged pause that made her breath hitch, and then, as if acknowledging the intensity between them, he leaned closer, pressing a soft, deliberate kiss to her temple, not urgent, not demanding, but claiming. Warmth radiated through her chest, through every nerve ending, and she realized with a startled thrill that she had never wanted anything so much without knowing why. "I shouldn't be here," he whispered against her hair, almost to himself. "I shouldn't want this, but..." His voice trailed off, heavy with a promise that hung in the air like smoke. "I do." She lifted her gaze to meet his, searching for hesitation, for retreat. There was none, only an unspoken assurance that, dangerous as he was, in that moment she was safe, more than safe, desired, important. Then he stood, slowly, reluctantly, gathering himself. He moved to the door, but paused, turning back with that same magnetic intensity. "I'll be back," he said quietly. Not a request, not a question, a vow. His thumb brushed her lips in one last lingering gesture, a promise of more to come. She watched him leave, the door closing behind him with a soft click. Silence settled over the cafe again, but it was different now, charged, heavy with the mark he had left behind. She touched her lips, feeling the echo of his kiss, the warmth of his presence, and she knew, deep down, that her life was no longer ordinary, that the man she had helped, the man she shouldn't have wanted, had changed something in her, something permanent. And somewhere in the quiet of the morning, she could almost hear him whisper, carried on the faint memory of his voice, "Next time, you won't stop at a kiss." Her heart fluttered with anticipation and fear, and she realized that she didn't want to. Not now, not ever. The world outside waited, unpredictable and dangerous, but inside, in the quiet after the storm, she felt a spark that promised more closeness, more heat, more danger, and she knew it was only the beginning. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story. Good night and sweet dreams.